I know whenever I say this, it almost sounds like I'm bullshitting or I'm joking and shit, but whenever I say I'm not a fan of a particular topic, it's usually true. And I'm not talking about it just so that I can seem like I belong to a certain class of people or I side with one side or the other. Like, whenever I'm saying, for example, that my least favorite topic, which I'm supposed to be discussing on this episode, is money, I actually mean it. Although, in the particular case that is this episode, it's not the only thing that I'm going to be talking about, which is actually a massive relief. So, this episode is going to feature money, but it's going to give some love to big people and big decisions and some pretty big news. And that kind of makes the whole money bit kind of bearable when you kind of think about it, because I don't have to deal with it from start to finish. And I can kick things off with a story that does not involve money, like the one that I have here, which comes all the way from China. Now, very recently, people under 50 kilograms were banned from the streets of China due to the typhoon Saola, which, to be honest, sounds very, very weird, because normally people like to restrict fat people from doing shit. So to see that the skinny people, the light people, are being prevented from doing stuff because of nature seems a little bit weird. You know, because it's almost like nature's been listening to this podcast and, clearly has a liking for thick women. So, in favor of this particular situation, I would like to repeat the very nice saying that usually states, and I want you to finish this one for me, thick thighs actually saves...
Get ready for the battle of the sexes.
Now that I actually think about it for a quick second, I feel like this particular title would have been used for a sexual joke so well and I kind of wasted it. Because, it could have also meant that China and nature clearly have a thing for thick bodies, because they feel like these other babes shouldn't be on the streets. Like, let the skinny ladies get cuffed. They want the thick bodies on the streets. Type of shit like that. But anyways, that was a joke that I kind of couldn't let just go to waste, even though I didn't use it. But let me just read the real story for y'all real quick. So it says, and I quote, Typhoon Saola made landfall in the southern Chinese province of Guangdong early on Saturday as violent winds lashed nearby Shenzhen, Hong Kong, and Macau, leaving at least one dead and a trail of destruction and flooding in many areas. The Asian financial hub of Hong Kong and China's neighboring populous province of Guangdong had cancelled hundreds of flights on Friday and shut businesses, schools, and financial markets as Saola had edged closer. End quote. Now, when you kind of look at a story like this for a little bit, it kind of feels tough that China's going through stuff like this, but I feel like this is what happens to every superpower in the world the moment they feel like they're too big for their shit. Because when you kind of think about it, this is China and it's got a typhoon. Then you look at the USA, which used to be one of the biggest superpowers in the world, and even Americans still believe that it's the most powerful country in the world, blah blah. And they have had earthquakes, they have had tornadoes, they have had some of the wildest weather conditions on planet Earth. Alright? Then you look at Germany, now they don't have any jokes. You look at France, their men have been stated online to be some of the worst sexual abusers and catcallers when it comes to dealing with women. And you look at the British and their food never usually has salt. So you kind of think about it, this is a problem that affects every single country that likes to claim superpower status. But hey, what do I know about superpower status? I'm just a guy that does a podcast from a so-called developing country, which I probably should have started in a slightly better way by saying, welcome to Breakdown on West Side, your number one breakdown podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who is also planning to ban women under 50 kilograms from approaching him, because y'all know I like my women thick. He is a man who believes that astrology should have been the study of ass. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. This show, honestly, usually tends to have like one topic base the entire way, or at least for like 2/3 of the way. But I feel like this time I was like, fuck this shit. I'm not a particularly big fan of talking about money, and I think some people aren't all that big of fans of it. So instead of having it be like a central theme to the entire episode, I can just stick to money as the main topic and, I can have fun with the others. because at the end of the day, the intro and the rant weren't really supposed to be all about sticking to a certain theme. They were bits for me to have fun and talk about other stuff that goes on in the world, which I definitely will do. And if you want to contribute to the making of that, you can hit me up on IG. It is at Breaktime on Westside. On Facebook, it is also at Breaktime on Westside. And on Twitter, or as they know it nowadays as X, you can send it to at Bagaka the D. The DMs are always open, and I would be more than happy to receive your stories. And we can continue having more interesting intros and rants and maybe even main topics and shit. But speaking of main topics, I know I do need to get to it. But before I do that, I want to do a quick recap of what happened last week, or at least a lot of the very interesting entertainment news that happened last week. Because unlike most other weeks, I don't think I've had one with as shocking a surprise, or at least as shocking of an alleged story than what I've seen over the past week. Now, for those of y'all that didn't pay too much attention, for the most part, what was mostly being talked about was actually separation and divorce. Well, people call it divorce, it could be separation, but yeah. So apparently, there's been some number of separations and divorces on an international as well as a local level. So on the international level, I think the most prominent one was Gina Mai and Jeezy. I think that's her name, Gina Mai or Jeannie Mai. Then on the Kenyan scene, that was the story of director Phil and Kate Actress. And I'm sure there were some people that probably expected me to cover these stories, especially since the Jeezy one didn't happen last week. It was even older than that. But all in all, I haven't really felt the need to talk about these stories. I honestly haven't even felt compelled to really give too much of a flying damn about them. I'm not really into the whole power couple thing. I've never really been a fan of it. But, since I have discussed divorce situations, I have discussed separations and all on this podcast, maybe some people actually thought that I would discuss it, to which, to be very honest, I think if you've listened to this podcast long enough, probably you might not have noticed this, but whenever I usually discuss such stories, I don't discuss them because it's a divorce or a separation. I usually discuss it for the meat inside it. I go and I look for the details. Like, for example, with the whole Dr. Dre divorce situation, it was more of the demands that the ex-wife was making so that she can get alimony and spousal support and shit. And that's something that I could talk about. If it's, for example, someone like Tyrese, who claimed that the judge was racist and hurled a bunch of insults and shit, I could talk about that and talk about how that's a very dumb decision. I will usually go into the context of what's there and the whole story around it, because there are some things that can be discussed. But for the most part, if I'm not doing that or finding some sense of comedic entertainment from the whole situation, I normally won't really discuss it, because it's not really my place to start talking about whether a bond between two people that I am not a part of, I don't even know directly, should be handled, whether it should be kept or it should be broken, whether it being broken is a good thing or a bad thing. That's not really my thing, so I just never really thought that it should be something to be spoken about. But with that said, in as much as I was very open to ignoring that piece of news, I think the one that just made the most headlines was the fact that apparently there's a rumor going around that Tems is pregnant with Future's baby, which just seems like the most surprising shit I have ever heard and talked about on this podcast. Normally, I will hear certain news about things and I won't be as surprised, but Tems getting pregnant by Future is probably the most shocking thing that most people have heard of, at least over this past week. Because when you kind of think about it, we all know Future. We know who Future is, not just as a master of toxicity, at least as some people believe, but as a guy that has multiple kids from multiple women. As it stands, the guy is believed to have anywhere between 11 and 16 children that we know of. So this is a guy that's been having multiple kids with multiple women. So for someone who's as successful and who's doing pretty well for herself like Tems, to get pregnant by Future, it's almost like she wanted it, Although then again, this is a rumor, and at the same time, I think people might get this shit wrong. Because when you think about it, considering that Nigerians do tend to have the very uncanny ability of naming their children after very peculiar things such as, I don't know, Good Luck Jonathan, Future might actually be a Nigerian man that she's been in love with and she's had as a boyfriend, and that's who she's having a baby with. You might find that the full name of Future is Future Adeola, and it's a Nigerian dude. And at the end of the day, maybe there was someone that was busy telling her that she might not have a future with music, but she's like, whether or not I have a future, I know I'm gonna have a baby future, stuff like that. And in that particular case, some of us might be expecting that she might be banging a light-skinned Future, so that at the end of it she can say that she had a bright future inside of her, just the same way that right now she'd be having a bright future inside of her, or at least a light-skinned one. Either way, as of the time of the recording of this episode, I can confirm that it hasn't been confirmed, so it's technically still a rumor and it's still an allegation. So up until that's confirmed, I guess it's just up to speculation for us. I'm going to leave it at that and move it on to our main topic of today. Now, well, we already know that it's money I'm gonna talk about, but in this particular context, it's another case of someone who decides to say something on a certain platform of media regarding relationships and money and makes it very one-sided on the whole gender scale, and it's supposed to sound controversial and shit. And it isn't supposed to seem like it's particularly great for the other gender if the gender that is being ostracized here doesn't live up to the monetary expectations and shit. Either way, I will play the clip before I can get into discussing it so that at least you have your own pre-formed opinion on what's been said before I can get into talking about mine. So, without further ado...
True men never ask the girlfriends for money. Please, girls. True men cannot ask you for money. They ask money from the boys. His boys, not you. That is a huge red duvet. Stop ignoring it.
Alright, I guess. Well, this is another case of a dude busy talking about if a dude isn't doing dude shit when it comes to money, then drop him. I don't know. Do I really feel like discussing this shit? Like, to be very honest, in as much as I may not enjoy discussing it, I can understand the importance of discussing, money in relationships and all. It's just that, to be very honest, I feel like there's better alternative discussions with better impact that I feel should be discussed, because a lot of people put too much focus on the money when it comes to relationships these days than it probably should have. Like, to be very honest, I think I'd probably suggest people have discussions like, I don't know, increasing the amount of paternity leave time so that, husbands and fathers can get to spend more time with their children and have better bonds with the babies, and help the wives out or the baby moms. And for the most part, I actually do see that sort of a topic as having a lot better of a reach in terms of the impact, and the benefits of having such a debate can actually be highly beneficial for people that aren't even all that interested in the relationship space, because that can blend into HR and business practices and corporate and everything. And it's something that actually has some real impact. But people talking about your man shouldn't borrow money from you, your man shouldn't do this and that, or expect you to pay for shit. Like, I feel like most of those discussion points have been spoken about through until people are mostly tired of them. Because honestly, I feel like we're beating a dead horse for the most part. And if you care that much about your individual finances, then maybe you shouldn't really be dating, because there's a certain sense of selflessness that needs to be there, and you might actually be lacking in it. But hey, then again, I might be wrong about that shit. Let's see if the comments have something different to say. So when I looked at a bunch of the comments here, a number of them were actually sort of agreeing with what the guy was saying. So there was one woman who said, men of these days, they borrow you money and they don't even refund back, and they don't feel any chills. Someone was busy saying, stop shouting, just talk normally. The other one was asking, what about husbands asking for finances from their wives to be refunded though? Is that right? And I think one of the few standout ones was another one who spoke about men and the audacity and said, quote unquote, men and the audacity. Tell me why we're 3 weeks into talking and someone is asking me to fuel his car, and mind you, I have never even asked for 10 bob airtime from him. End quote. And, like, a lot of these things just seem like, yes, the man should never ask you for money, which, kind of makes sense to a certain degree for some people. But before I can get into whether it's a red flag or not, to be quite honest, I feel like what most people here are saying is just mostly a stack of bull and, individual situations that don't reflect the general feel, or at least the general situation for most guys. Because to be very honest, when a guy is asking you to fuel the car 3 weeks into knowing them, whether or not you've asked them for shit, I think that's a little bit of a weird situation. Like, dude got too comfortable asking you for money too quickly. And maybe you should raise some eyebrows, or at least maybe you should raise a couple of question marks for that. But with that said, is it okay for dudes to ask their women, their wives, their girlfriends for money? And to be very honest, I think that it's okay and it's also not okay for various different reasons. Now, I will try and go through the very hard task of saying that they should before I go to why they shouldn't. And to be very honest, I think it should be okay, especially considering that we're in this feminist world where people are busy talking about my partner, so you're supposed to have some equal level opportunity in that shit. Like, this is the time when women are also getting paid just about the same as men are getting paid. You go to work, if you all do the same job and you're working in the same fields, you probably might be making roughly about the same amounts of money. So for you to refuse to chip in and help your partner out feels a little bit selfish when you can see them struggling and they're not doing all that great, because you have the capability to assist him get out of his situation and you're not doing anything. And this guy is probably asked. If anything, that's particularly selfish, because on one end, yes, probably you're not married to the guy, so it's perfectly okay for you to say no, but on the other hand, it's a chance for you to test out and see if this is someone who can be trusted with money, and if you can't trust him with money, then, maybe your reasons for dating him shouldn't be financial or anything of the sort. But even then, like, imagine you refuse to help this person when they're down. Like, now try and think about having a long-term relationship with this person. It's not like when they're in their worst moments, or like they're jobless and they don't have money and shit, you'll be sitting right across them on the dining table while they're just having, water and dreams for dinner, and you're having takeout and you're saying sucks to be you. If you're gonna be in a relationship with this person, then you're going to have to be comfortable helping him out at some point. Because at the end of the day, it's not like you having money and him not having money means that the both of you don't have money. If you guys can help each other, then you can probably go further together, And also, if this is the person that you want to refer to you as their best friend, or their close confidant, or someone that they feel they can be vulnerable with, if you're unable to help, and you can clearly see that they're in a vulnerable position, but you would much rather look at them like that, like, how exactly would you want to be considered a significant other? Like, this is the era where women are happy being referred to as their partner's best friend. Like, you're willing to take up that title, but you're not willing to help out in the best ways possible? The relationship isn't just fucking intimacy and who gets what gender roles. Like, if y'all are going to be great friends to each other, then help each other as well when it comes to the financial shit. But anyways, with all of that said, considering that some women will still think that I'm just spewing a bunch of BS, some men too, let me also look at why guys shouldn't borrow money from their women, or why guys shouldn't be comfortable borrowing money from their women. It's mostly because on one end, I don't think that there's a lot of women that actually believe that guys should borrow money, so they might actually lose respect for you to a certain degree, which I know it sounds very toxic, it sounds very off and a little bit weird, but it is a reality. There are women that, when they see a guy in a position of, financial uncertainty, where he's not sure if he's gonna get money or he's not doing too well financially, they kind of, view them as weak or incapable, and that's a very unfortunate reality. And I hope that if you're listening to this, you're not one of those people or with someone who's like that, but if you're with someone who's kind of like that, then probably borrowing money from them, not unless if it's a last resort, is probably a bad idea. All right. Then secondly, a lot of times when guys borrow money from babes, it's like they keep a record and they can use that shit to beat you with it in an argument. Like, they will talk about how they helped you when times were hard. They will talk about everything they have ever done for you, even though it's only one time when they gave you 500 bob because you didn't have that money in cash. They will talk about how they have assisted you through tough times and they always come through for you whenever you're down, but you don't do the same thing. And that's because they paid for the drinks because your card wasn't working or some shit. So at the end of the day, like, you can borrow money, but it's like they're gonna hold it over your head the entire time. And I'm not saying that this is for every single woman. It's just that there's some that actually do this, and they can be particularly, unforgiving and unforgetting about that shit. And that's not something that you can say is particularly enjoyable to have. Like, don't get me wrong, owing someone money isn't great, and not paying them back is an absolute bad thing to happen or to do to someone. But sometimes you find that you might take a little bit longer. But now all of a sudden the person who loaned you the money is about to start losing their shit. They treat you like garbage. They talk to you like you're shit. And yet the reality is that, you might have hit a hiccup or you might have some delays. I'm not saying that, you should always be nice and be graceful all the time. But, sometimes there should be some leeway that's given. But I don't think there's that many babes that give that sort of leeway when it comes to their guys. And most times they expect, that the money is paid back, even though the babe can also ask for that money almost as a loan and probably never even pay it back. And expect that guy to let that shit slide and be okay with it and move on like nothing's really happened. Which, to be very honest, can be particularly annoying. And considering that there's that fear in the first place, by the time a guy is thinking of asking for cash from his babe, either the babe is known to be generous, or he knows that the babe will be willing to give the money easily, or the guy has to muster up a shit ton of strength, a shit ton of confidence, and has to be in a particularly low point before he goes ahead and he asks you for money. Like, I feel like I've taken too long to get here, but yeah, here we are. It's going to take a lot of guys a lot before they actually ask their women for money, and it's mostly for the reasons that I've just mentioned why guys shouldn't be asking their women for money. Because just like a lot of other things, it's like y'all hold it above us for the rest of our lives, which isn't all that great, even though the money comes back to you on time. And with that said, let me just conclude by saying that I don't find this whole thing of talking about money as a topic to be particularly appealing. I think I've spoken about money topics so much that I've kind of gotten tired of it, but at the same time I've started coming out with a little bit more concrete ideas on shit and more concrete conclusions, which I think I probably wouldn't have gotten to if I actually stopped talking about money. But that doesn't mean that people should continue talking about who pays the bill, what does so and so bring to the table. Should a guy be willing to give money for this? Should a guy be willing to put money down on this and that? Should he be okay dating a broke guy? Like, I feel like some of those topics are so used up and washed up that they have no taste, they practically have no flavor, and there's no different angle that you can bring out to talk about those situations that hasn't been discussed before. And to kind of, round all of this up, at the end of the day, when you kind of think about finance in relationships, or at least money in relationships, if you care so much about financial situations when it comes to relationships, regardless of which gender you are, probably you shouldn't be dating. Because when you kind of think about it, if you care so much about the guy having to pay the bill on the first date, to the point that you lose respect for him, or you feel he should be dropped if he asks for you guys to split the bill, then maybe you shouldn't be dating in the first place. Because clearly your money can't be our money, and you want to keep your money for yourself regardless of how the relationship could be, which is perfectly okay. Also, if you're a guy and you feel like having a discussion on money with your babe is something that you wouldn't be open to doing, or you think that most, if not all, women are gold diggers, then maybe you shouldn't be dating either. Because clearly, your love for your money heavily outweighs your desire to at least risk it so that you can find the best babe to actually spend your life with. Either way, I might be wrong about either one of these things, just to say I could be wrong about this entire podcast, so I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open on IG, on Facebook, it is at Breaktime, on our side, on Twitter, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.